Hello everyone, I'm Taka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the nuts and bolts episodes. For those of you who have joined us before on those episodes, you know what we do is we bring out practical tools and strategies to address everyday leadership challenges or questions, and I never do this alone. Always do this with Robert, our technical lead at Busara Africa. Hello, Robert. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. So in the previous episode of our Nuts and Bolts sessions, we talked about effective delegation. And as you remember, Robert was saying, delegation has never been an easy thing for a lot of leaders, but with constant practice, learning from mistakes, one can pick it up, master it. And if you haven't listened to the episode, please take a moment and do so. So today, Robert, what are we focusing on this episode?
Hey, today I'm super excited because something I'm always liked when we discuss this in meetings and trainings, we will be discussing organizational culture. And we define organizational culture in many of our meetings and having conversations with our clients to say how it's all about how do we do things around here. You know, how do we buy the paper? We want to buy paper. How do we get the clients to get the information they want within our own context as an organization? What you stop noticing 6 months after you started it.
Yes, so I like that one because when you first walk in, isn't it true? Huh? When you first walk into a new space, you're like, so this is how these people do things. Oh, you mean they do things? Oh, okay. So, and you get in line when you are new, your eyes are fresh, as you shine your eyes wide and you can see. After a while, you become part of how they do things, right? You don't even notice.
They ship into line. And many times when we leaders call us or we work with leaders on different issues, it could be anything, it could be something unrelated to organizational culture. I remember we have a client, we're working on something else, and they mentioned a issue about, and as we listen, myself and Taka, we're standing there, we're listening. You know, one thing we do, we look at each other's face and we say, this has something to do with the culture, you know, and always it's something, look at it and see that it's something that it does not fit within the culture. It sticks its head up and it becomes a big monster. If the culture is dealt with, this could have been resolved.
Oh, yes. And I think you're so right. I think this is why this is also one of my favorite topics as well. Because you've seen how in so many of our leadership programs and the workshops that we do, this is the one where we get constant questions. This is the one that is keeping leaders awake at night. So yes. This is one of my favorites too.
So Taka, we are all saying this is our favorite thing and it comes up all the time. But why does it matter? Why does organizational culture even matter at all in this dispensation or the conversation we are having?
So there's a couple of reasons why culture is keeping so many leaders awake at night and giving them gray hair. One of the first things is that many of you have realized that culture affects whether your organization thrives or dimes. In other words, your organizational culture ultimately influences the performance of your organization or company. Yeah? So you may have a wonderful strategy. And, you've seen us, Robert. We've been called in to help organizations review their old strategy, design a new, more responsive, agile strategy. But we always tell those organizations, we may work with you on developing a beautiful strategy. But if you don't have the culture to deliver on that strategy, then forget it. It'll be something that just sits on paper. And that's probably why Peter Drucker, the management specialist, says that culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. And the reason he says this is because culture matters, because it serves almost as a very powerful signal of what's acceptable in your workplace and what is not acceptable, no matter what is written down in policy. So I think policy is important. Policy is the foundation, the starting place. But often, culture is broader than the policy. Culture is about whether the policy is implemented or not. So if you have a policy that states everybody comes to work at 8:30, the culture will determine whether people actually come to work at 8:30 or whether they stroll in at 9 o'clock. And so you may find someone who might be very bad in terms of managing timekeeping. They're always late. They're definitely not someone who's punctual. But when they work in a place where everyone comes to work on time, they don't want to be the odd one out. So they will come to work on time, or they don't want to get sanctioned. So often, I know, Robert, you've heard people talk about this, and it's one of those things I don't like hearing people say, but it's often we hear it in our workshops. People will say, why is it small bit of rain here in Ghana and people start to come to work late? When they're working in Holland or Germany as all the boggers, they can be 12 inches of snow. They will all be there on time. And we often we're saying, okay, so they're always wondering, how can the same person, when they're in Ghana, do one thing one way, but when they're, with the global north or they're in the west, then, and we often say it's the organizational culture, if that is actually true, because they realize you come late to work there are consequences. Here you stroll in, the culture is like not a big deal in some organizations. So you see, culture therefore becomes such an important, almost saying to people, this you can do and this you can't do, which ultimately influences the performance of your organization. So that's why I would say it really matters, Robert.
It sounds like, it's something that we shouldn't avoid, something we must focus on as leaders, and we would not miss it. Because if it will eat our strategy for breakfast, we better get it before we get to lunch and dinner.
Yes. Or you will not be eating at all again as an organization.
So yes, very important. Another interesting thing that comes along is, because we don't think about these things, they seem so difficult to make a shift, once we see that, we draw attention that, this is a culture thing, and now it becomes difficult to make the shift, to the position where they want to be, or some common challenges that we've seen right now in organizations, not being able to, make the shift that they really, really, really want to make, because it's very difficult for them. How do we go about these things? How do we ensure that even with the difficulties that comes with it, we are able to make the shift when our eyes are shining on these things, that this is a cultural thing and we need to make a shift?
So maybe I will answer that question by talking about why it's so hard to shift organizational culture, because this is an acknowledgement. This is an affirmation for all of you leaders who are out there and really frustrated about, can't get it to shift. It's a recognition that it is hard to shift. And part of the reason it's hard to shift is because culture is a combination of many things. It's a combination of shared values, goals, attitudes, practices. So it's not just one thing. We often talk about it's the way things are done here, but what influences how things are done around here are lots of things. So because it's not just one easy piece, and often it's quite insidious. You can't see it. Sometimes you can't put your finger on it. You even stop seeing it. You stop recognizing that's what it is, which is what makes it hard to shift. Now, some of the common challenges I know you and I have heard in terms of leaders grappling with something off with the culture. Common one is where an organization needs a more customer-oriented or service cultures, but employees behave completely differently. We've been in the hospitality industry, we've been to restaurants, hotels, where literally either the waiters or the other staff act like they're doing you a huge favor. Yet if you read the website, you read all the policies, probably the strategy of that particular hotel or chain of hotels, they would say, our belief is that the customer is everything. So what they need desperately is an organizational culture that reflects that, the way all employees behave, the kinds of ways they engage with customers reflects that. And yet then the leaders find, oops, we actually don't have that. So that's one common challenge I've seen in terms of culture. Another one is where you need a culture that's a lot more professional. Professional in terms of responsive, in terms of timelines, detail-oriented, no mistakes, no sense of sloppiness. All of that, you might find a leader wants that type of culture. And instead, what do they find? They find a culture where people are just taking their time, people are sloppy with their work, they're not responsive to deadlines. So that's another, so you have a very kind of informal, relaxed, just not kind of serious culture, when what the leader really wants is a highly professional, responsive culture. That's another one I've seen that really, can be very stressful. And one space that you and I have definitely worked in, where we've seen lots of challenges around culture, is the public sector. And that's a space where we often say we would love a lot more service orientation when you're seeing something more different. Would love a lot more professionalism when you're seeing something different. Would love a lot more ethics, a more ethical culture when you're seeing. So that has been one space I've seen where leaders have really struggled with, or those on the receiving end of that culture have really struggled with what they're seeing. So those are some of the common challenges I have seen.
And I also really identify with the next thing we're going to talk about, which I'm sure is one of the key challenges, is around who influences the culture, who makes the culture work. I mean, who is responsible? Who is responsible for positioning the needed culture to achieve the goals? Or, for instance, we are saying now that public sector wants to ABC to happen, or a hospitality industry, hotel, restaurants wants to see something else. They have written it on paper nicely. It is really boldly put on their walls and everything. But you see that in the especially, and one thing we forgot, one industry is bank. The banking.
Yes.
They will put the values of service and everything on the wall, and even put feedback thing on their desk and everything.
Yes.
And what you experience in the banking hall is very different from what they have written down just in front of you as you experience. So who is responsible for ensuring that what is on paper and what has been talked about in the orientation, everything comes to fruition, that customers experience it, colleagues, staff experience it in an organization?
I would say, just from the example you gave of the banking hall, clearly it's everybody. We all have a role to play in behaving in alignment with the organization's stated values and policies so that the culture reflects those values and policies. So all of us have a role to play. However, the key people we hold responsible for shaping and influencing the culture are those in leadership roles, and those in leadership positions. That is your core business. So anytime a leader comes to me, either through coaching or training, and they're saying, the culture, I'll be like, that's your job. That is one of your key responsibilities. And even though you may not be at the helm of the organization, you can still play a role in shaping the culture of the team or the one person that you lead. Because often the thing we find about cultures is that they're dynamic. And sometimes in many organizations, you don't have a monolithic culture. You may have an overall culture, but then you might have subsets of culture. So I come to the finance department and find those people are very on top. Then I go to this other department and I say, those ones, they're the ones who don't want to work with anybody. They have this type of culture. So you may also have subsets of culture. So I would say to leaders, start with where you are. Start in your corner with your team, really ensuring that the way you do things as a team then ideally starts to ripple out into the broader organization. So it's no excuse to say that, I'm not the head. If you're the head, then definitely this should be on the top of your list of things to do to influence organizational performance. Don't just leave it to HR and people of culture. This is everybody's business, but particularly those of you at the top and those of you in leadership roles.
Wow. Thank you so much, Taka. If I am a CEO, I am the board chair, I am a decision maker listening to you now, what tool will you give me to go back to my organization and say, look, we are going to look at our culture. This is a tool that we want to use to make sure that we assess our culture. And how do I go about, or what would you recommend for me to look at in doing such a shift or a change within my organization?
Okay, so since this is the nuts and bolts section episode, I definitely should provide you with a very concrete tool. And the tool that Busara developed, because this was just coming up so much. I mean, leaders were saying to us, okay, Taka, we get it. This matters. But how? And give us a structured, systemized way of starting to shape organizational culture. And so what we have is what we call the Damon tool. And Damon is an acronym for D-A-M-A-N. So D-A-M-A-N, the Damon. So it's really the Damon model. And it's a tool used to assess and shape organizational culture to meet organizational goals. So let me go through each of them, and then you can stop me to ask questions at any point. So the D starts for define. Really define the culture that you want. Because what we found is you may be, so for instance, different companies or different organizations may need different types of cultures. So let's say you're in a culture let's say you're an organization that's more regulatory. You are checking whether people are complying with rules. That means the culture that you want has to be one that standards are important, where you're constantly making sure compliance is important. You yourself are complying with things. That's the culture you want. But let's say you're a startup, innovating and trying new things in the market. Then the culture you want is not one of constantly complying with rules, but it's one where you're constantly experimenting, trying different things. So it's important that you define what is the type of culture you need to meet your company or organizational objectives. And to break it down, you can break it down in terms of behaviors or values. Make sure you have the values, link that with a number of behaviors. Too many times we have very nice, as you said, values on a wall. Well, what does that actually mean in practice? So define what are the key values, and I sometimes call them illustrative behaviors that would capture the culture that you want. So that's the define. I would say that's the first place you start. All right? As you define those, make sure you're communicating consistently so everyone is clear about the expected behavior and culture. And sometimes you should even ensure your partners, constituencies, and other stakeholders know what behaviors they can hold you accountable for. That's why you see it on the banking hall wall. That's why you're seeing it at the telecom wall, when you go to the telecom provider, because they want you to know that that is the culture, those are the values they aspire to, so you should hold them accountable. So that's step one. Define what you want. Step two then is assess what you have. That's the A. assess what you have. Take an honest look at your culture. Chances are you're not starting from scratch. You might have been in business, been together as an organization, a couple of months, couple of years. So you have a culture. Huh? Take an honest look at what you have. Determine what behavior patterns are undermining and which ones are working for you. Discuss what you find with the team and almost develop a shared urgency and compelling reason for change. Because culture and this assessing and reviewing is something that you have to constantly do. Because, Robert, what I found is culture is dynamic. It changes in response to them. So I bet you many organizations are finding that their cultures may have shifted during COVID in response to that changing environment. I'm sure even now, given the economic crisis that many of us are facing in many African countries, our organizational cultures are shifting. So constantly we have to be assessing, are we still on track? Do we still have the right culture that we need to deliver the results? Hi folks, hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show.
Some interesting thing that what you mentioned, and I think that's somewhere that as leaders we have a lot of challenge with is a sense of urgency. You are seeing it as the leader, as to serious. Me as a bank teller, you are the CEO. They are seeing that we need to be more excellent. Me, I'm just giving money to people. What is this excellence you are talking about? And I don't see the urgency. How will leaders be able to whip up interest in their colleagues, in their teams, to be able to get on board with them or see the light with them, to be able to jump onto the bandwagon to say, okay, we are all leading to excellence, and therefore I follow you to achieve that excellence or whatever culture that you are bringing. That sense of urgency, how do we build that?
Love this question because, it's so tied to how we bring about change and how we lead change in our organizations. And you and I know when we're working with leaders in driving change, we always say a key thing is how you communicate. You don't communicate once, you communicate 5 billion times. There's no such thing as under-communicating when you're leading change. The second thing around communication, because when you're changing the culture, this is about driving change, isn't it? It's how you communicate. And when it comes to change, you always have to remember the acronym. Remember that acronym? WIISM. Did I get it right? What's in it for me? So if I am going to make a case to a teller about being a lot more customer-oriented, I need to make the case. I don't have to be bringing out all my big books, as we say, kind of my big book long. I need to break it down to her, to explain to her, how does it benefit her to be a lot more customer-oriented? And what I'd be explaining to her is that, sis, competition out there in the financial sector is tough. We're all hustling for business as banks out there. The more business we have, guess what? The more tellers we can have. So part of keeping your jobs, when customers come here and they're happy, you are a front line, you really matters. Our customer experience often is defined by what happens in the banking hall. When they engage with you and they're happy, chances are they stay with us. If they engage with you and they have a terrible experience, they walk out. Trust me, there's another bank ready to grab their business. We lose business, we can't keep all of you here. We grow business, you stay, there are more opportunities to progress. So that would be a key part of whipping up the urgency, is really communicating constantly to people in a way that they can see. Unfortunately, these are human beings. What's in it for me to shift my behavior to display the culture I want to see?
What is in it for me? Very important.
Remember that.
This is not my mother's job. This is not my father's job. I will carry it on my back.
So we need to describe it, yes, in a way that I make you carry it. There's deep ownership of this job because you now understand how customer orientation as part of the culture then benefits you. So that was the second one, around really being able to make the case. I'll move to the third one then. So first, assess what you have. So the first one was define what you want. Number two, assess what you have. And part of assessing that is probably making the case for why what you have needs to change to what you want. The third one is model the way. That's what the M is for in Damon. Model the way. It's really saying that make sure you and all members of everybody who's holding a leadership role or position models the expected behavior. Because if you don't, just don't bother. Don't bother bringing about change, because the first pushback you will have from those you are asking to change is like, why should I change when my manners just not changing? So if I'm talking about creating a more ethical culture, if I'm talking about creating a more empowering culture, if I'm talking about creating a more collaborative culture where you're breaking down silos, somebody will say, why should I be collaborating with that other department? What? Two directors, they're not even doing it. In fact, they've So yes, as I was saying, Robert, it's modeling the way is then critical in really ensuring that others, if you're not willing to display the behavior that's reflective of the culture that you want to see, you can't expect others to do that. So that's the end in modeling the way.
Yeah. So thank you. So I am excited already. We have how we have to define. Clearly, we need to define what we want. It says that set the vision and make it clear. So it's important that we set the vision and make it clear, importantly. And then also we have to assess what we have. As Taka said, important to assess what you have. And when you get what you have, you communicate it clearly to your people, what the next steps are, and continue to remember what is in it for them. Very important. And then we need to model the way. What do you call it? It's important that as you do it, you show, so that people would see what you're talking about, so that they can see. I work with a boss who always say, draw pictures. What you're talking about, please draw pictures.
Yeah.
You don't just say it, do it. Let us see. People see what you are talking about. And so these three are the first three that Taka has talked about, and they are very important. Taka, what are the last two, so that we can get all and put it in a basket in these two?
Yeah. Okay. So the last two. So I'm now moving to after the M is the A. And A is for attract. It's about attracting people who are already aligned with the values underpinning the culture that you want. So what do I mean by this? What I've often found is that when leaders are struggling with culture, often the issue is very value-driven. So they're looking for people, again, who are more professional, who have a strong work ethic, who are more ethical. It's all of those things who are a lot more around character. And we have often found that it's hard to train for character. Usually we train for skills. I always remember a cousin of mine who's in HR, Susan Gifuko, she always says, recruit for character, train for skills. So the attracting is about attract to your organization or company people who already embody the values and way of being illustrative of the culture that you want. So again, if you're looking for a culture that's a lot more innovative, that's a lot more creative, when you're hiring, when opportunities come up to recruit, look for people who are already innovative, who's not a huge stretch to be innovative. The same thing if you are looking for a culture that's a lot more detail-oriented, that's a lot focused on making sure every little box is ticked. Look for people who already have that, so that you are not trying to fit square boxes into round holes. You may have to deal with that with your existing staff, for some of them, but as you move people off the bus and get people on the bus, be very intentional as you're recruiting. Too many times in Africa, we're always recruiting for big qualifications. Do they have the third master's? Do they have the PhD? Do they have the what? And we forget that often those qualifications, they're not irrelevant, but usually what you are looking for is people who are willing to learn all of that. But most of all, you're looking for people who are aligned with you and your values. So really get good, be thoughtful as you attract people into your organization around that. And then the last one, the N, is probably, I would say, almost one of the most important ones. And the N stands for nurture. And it's nurture the behaviors and ways of being that make up the culture that you want. So how do you do that? You build capacity to display the desired behaviors. And in this respect, please pay attention to the soft skills, communication, giving difficult feedback, emotional intelligence. Again, that's a lot of what will help folks with the kind of behavior you want to see. Use coaching, mentoring, all of those things are key. Incorporate value-based behavior into performance evaluations. So when you're evaluating people's performance mid-year, end of the year, you're not just evaluating them, did you achieve X result? All of that is good, but it's also, did you display, in achieving those results, did you display the behavior we're trying to build as part of the culture? And therefore, you need to find ways, ultimately, of recognizing and rewarding the desired behavior. And this is the tough one, holding people accountable for the undesirable behavior. Because I'll tell folks that a key part of shaping culture is around, I hate to say, but it almost feels sometimes it's about rewards and sanctions. How are you constantly indicating this is acceptable, this is not acceptable? So that's the whole part around nurturing. So that's it. That's the Damon model.
The Damon model. And this is a Busara tool. And I am excited that we have introduced it to you. Remember the D for define, A for assess, M for model, A for attract, N for nurture. And I know this can be overwhelming. I mean, you are dealing with, for instance, if you're a bank CEO, you are dealing with checking the targets and making sure that all these things are done and ensuring that people dealing with the culture may be something that will be a little, out of your way for now. And maybe the HR is also focusing on recruiting new people to make sure these things are done. We are very happy to support your team from Busara. We are excited to always work with your team to ensure that we provide the backstop support, coaching, mentoring, leadership training, all the things we've mentioned in the Damon we do. We can help you define. We can help you assess. We can help you nurture. We can help you. All those things we can help you do. So if you're listening to us and you're having a difficulty, just reach out to us. The team is ready to run. We are like doctors, emergency, or whatever thing you bring, we'll just get the prescription and start to work right away. So we are there for you. Taka, we are happy that we have this opportunity to share this and looking forward to work with our clients and new people, whoever wants to come our way as Busara. We are always excited to work with them. We never leave you the same. We never leave you the same. So thank you, Taka, for such an amazing work.
Thank you, Robert. I love the plug for the work that we do. Yay, Robert. So, folks, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, one of the nuts and bolts episodes. And don't forget, if you liked the show, please subscribe or share with a friend or colleague who you know will get value from this. Thanks again and see you soon. Ciao.
Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you learned a lot. I did. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other great leaders. See you soon. Ciao.